Y'all want to hear something funny? According to my parents and sisters, the first words out of my mouth, and I mean this with no hyperbole, were Xbox, controller, and Halo. One of the first formative memories I have is feeling the Duke's rumble shake my body as I pulled down on the right trigger and fired that combat evolved assault rifle. My first multiplayer experience came from riding shotgun with my father as he controlled a warthog that went ripping and tearing through Sidewinder. I'll never forget seeing the tracks form on the snow and taking in the alien night as I felt the subtle rumble of a machine that go on to define pop culture for years on end. It was my first cognitive moment of realizing, oh, this is peak. Fast forward to 2021. Halo Infinite is now a free-to-play multiplayer experience. Modes like Firefight are considered non-essentials and will be added later down the road in a free update. Forge mode is non-existent. It's okay though. It'll be added in a free update. The campaign isn't available on launch. Instead, it'll be piecemealed and treated as a live service. Sure, the story will have an ending, but the complete saga will seemingly wrap up with future expansions. The game also isn't exactly a sequel to Halo 5 over here, but more of a course correction. This will be Halo's second course correction in the 20-year history of the franchise. Oh, the game's jam-packed with microtransactions, and you can no longer customize Spartan colors without earning them through battle passes and other frivolous methods. Then it hits me all at once. I'm 20 years old, and I'm actively watching my favorite franchise, the one that made me a gamer, die in front of me. My dad and I can't play split-screen co-op with this Halo again. I think to myself, something is deeply wrong with the state of the game industry. I've been thinking heavily about the Stop Killing Games movement that's going on in the EU. I remember murmurs of a petition going up to save The Crew 1 back in 2023, which kind of kicked all this off. Ubisoft, the developer, were way too big to let a game like The Crew even think about going offline. I mean, in the exact same year they announced this cancelization, Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, Assassin's Creed Mirage, The Settlers New Outliers, and oh, would you look at that, The Crew Motorfest. Now, this may come as a shock to y'all if you look at, anything that I post, but between you and me, I no joke love The Crew 1. As a JIT, I fully bought into the marketing hype. I mean, an open world racing game where you could effortlessly drive across the US, all while the game's oozing that mid-2000s street racing aesthetic? Sign me up. Sure, the game had some problems surrounding car handling early on and microtransactions that were a tad bit egregious, but I promise you, as you play the game and tweak a few settings, cars became really fun to handle, and nothing beats plotting my GPS from NYC to LA, all while I blare a future funk playlist in my Mustang GT that I'll never own in real life. Now no one will understand what this game feels like. I can't even tell you to run out there and buy a copy secondhand, because even if you manage to get one, once you pop that disc in, you'll be greeted with a server offline screen. And I know, I hear you in the comments.
Jilted, why don't you just play The Crew 2? It's bigger and better, and you can also fly with boats or race with planes.
And my answer to that is, I simply don't want to. While The Crew 2 is great in its own ways, and sure does things a lot better than The Crew 1, it's missing the atmosphere, soundtrack, and car handling I prefer when it comes between the two. It also goes back to the age-old conversation, why do I have to upgrade? What if I just want to stick with the version that spoke to me? I don't want to be forced into the Windows 11 ecosystem, Microsoft. I just grew to like Windows 10. Game companies have gotten way too chummy with forcing consumers to upgrade to their inferior products, with Xbox being the ones who usually spearheads change. Would you believe me if I told you the Xbox 360 dashboard used to look like this? Good old blades. A dashboard that quite literally revolutionized gaming moving forward. Front and center was Xbox Live, where you went to check up on friends and browse the marketplace. Underneath all of the UI tabs was quick access to load your disc. To the right was your games library, and to the right of that was the media tab. Something that will come back to haunt Xbox in due time. Blades were minimal yet effective, anyone who's anyone could cut on an Xbox 360 and get to where they needed to be with ease. The colors also shifting depending on what tab you had selected was a neat visual indicator to guide your brain along. Then, in 2008, we got this! My gosh. In an effort to upgrade the user experience, Xbox made the frustrating decision to force all users towards the new Xbox experience, or NXE for short, where they added avatars, aka Mii's, Xbox Mii's, and went for a column and rows design philosophy, with it erasing the Blades menu from time. This set a pretty scary precedent for the future of console gaming. Corporations could straight up erase or force change upon a user base who already formed memories with how things were, effectively killing what once was from the public consciousness. Which, you know, sucks? Once NXT was pushed out, there was zero room to customize the dashboard and head back to the Blades menu if you happen to prefer it over, again, whatever the hell this is. I know my 7-year-old self noticed the change, and while I liked the customization avatars brought, I always struggled with getting used to the new dashboard. It didn't help that by 2010 it changed again to accommodate the new Kinect peripheral, which was followed up again with the 2012 dashboard upgrade, which was by far the worst and most relevant one. This is when Xbox and Microsoft went full mask off. They crammed the dashboard full of ads on basically every swipe, forced Bing to become the search all button as it incorporated Xbox's growing blow on the digital storefront. So now, instead of searching simply for games, you'll also get movies and shows and music you do not care for. The user experience grew miserable. Compare this to Xbox's contemporaries, the PS3 and Wii. Their user interfaces only had minimal changes. In the PS3's case, the biggest change was PlayStation adding a plus button and What's New tab that showcased recent releases on the PS Store. And the Wii had, well, nothing in terms of UI updates, but that's kind of my point. What Xbox has been doing for 2 decades is a lot more sinister to me. With each dashboard change and advertisement campaign launched, they straight up get to rewrite history to new consumers. All of this is what led to that infamous 2013 E3. In retrospect, it makes sense why so many people were blindsided by the TV multimedia push they went for, because in the minds of many, Xbox was still this, not the ad-based entertainment streaming hellscape it became. UIs are a big part of any console experience. It's the first memory you make when you hit that on button. Having absolutely no room for preservation in that respect has always been baffling to me, and it speaks to the grander problems with modern gaming. To put it simply, when did it become okay to radically change the most basic of functions from us the players? Even Nintendo wasn't immune to the erasure propaganda. I mean, as we all know, they closed Miiverse on both the 3DS and Wii U before those respective eShops even thought about biting the dust. To level with you guys, being Gen Z and growing up side by side with this strange fusion of capitalism and art really opened my eyes to just how often even the little aspects of my gaming life were overwritten and controlled by corporations who, truthfully, really couldn't give a damn about how I wanted to experience the art I purchased. Ubisoft looked me in my eyes and told me I will not enjoy The Crew 1 because they made a sequel that's bigger and better. And I'm supposed to tell them, hey, it's all good, just because The Crew 2 got an offline mode update due to pushback on a previous entry in the franchise? Even though they could have simply added offline to The Crew 1 like we asked for? Xbox told me I will enjoy avatars and ads, while this ripping Blades from the hard drive. Nintendo got rid of one of the few genuinely dope kid-friendly pieces of social media by axing Miiverse, and as a side effect of that, they ruined the Wii U dashboard for the rest of time. Call me controversial, but gutting services and radically changing features is bad. That said, it wouldn't be nearly as detrimental if it wasn't for the fact Xbox over here planted the seed, watered the soil, and went ahead and let the garden get overtaken by greedy weeds. Getting rid of the Blades Dash was the first domino in the AAA gaming space that led to Halo 2 servers being shut down in 2010. It led to the companies pulling plugs on the OG live service titles like Free Roam, Dust 514, one of my underrated favorites, Section 8. It's even the reason why we have such intrusive DRM in modern games. Oh, Hey Xbox, you're back again! Games for Windows Live! While not the first widespread case of DRM, it is easily the most obtuse and intrusive form of DRM that has gone on to quite literally gut multiple PC games as the years have gone on. Psst, Capcom, I'm still waiting for you to fix Lost Planet 2 so we can play it online again on the PC. Thanks in advance. While there've been a few successes like Grand Theft Auto 4 where a company will come in and remove Game for Windows Live to keep the game alive, no pun intended, there's way too many online services that straight up no longer exist thanks to the discontinuation of this service. Funnily enough, GTA 4 is one of those games. The only way you can engage with the multiplayer in 2025 is via fan mods and clients, but titles like Battle Station Pacific, Dark Void, Fable 3, Street Fighter Cross Tekken, heck, even Shadowrun, which for the record was an online-only game, all of these games are either delisted from Steam, left broken if you own, and most importantly, have their online features gutted thanks to the abhorrent implementation and discontinuation of Games for Windows Live, effectively meaning these games are dead. In short, this has been my entire cognitive gaming life. Whether it's games or dashboards, I watch them all fall and effectively die in front of my very eyes. Which leads me to another question. How do we really know when games die? This is going to be a bit abstract, but stick with me. What if I told you guys changing games via patches and updates is also kind of killing games? Back during the 6th generation of consoles, my gosh, Xbox cannot catch a break in this video. Sorry. Xbox introduced the concept of Xbox Live, a service that not only allowed you to connect with other players online, it also enabled downloads for DLC, game updates, and even standalone Xbox Live arcade titles. Oh yeah, neat little nugget of lore for y'all who didn't know. XBLA predates the 360. Long live Hamster Ball, am I right? The 7th gen is when updates really started to matter. Suddenly, games were okay launching in beyond broken states, and not even patches could save how rotten some of these titles were to their core. Fallout New Vegas is one of the most infamous early examples of a game going from rags to riches in the eyes of the fandom, because on release, there was a lot of this. Spinning heads, frequent crashes, progression bugs, all of this and more for the low price of $59.99. Hey, it's okay though. This is just a fringe case in the AAA space. Truth be told, it only released this way because Bethesda and ZeniMax rushed Obsidian to meet a release deadline, and over time the game was fixed up with patches, so no harm, no foul. For now, most of the 360 generation is somewhat spared from this fate. If you happen to own a disc copy of a game, 9 out of 10 times it'll run and play fine. But it's that 10% exception to the rule that hurts. Eventually, 360 update servers will go offline, meaning that if you go back and attempt to play New Vegas in the modern day, you're only going to deal with the buggy and crash-filled version. Also, PC players are well aware of the fact New Vegas and many other Bethesda games, funnily enough, need copious fan mods and fixes to keep these titles stable. What happens when these mod sites unfortunately go offline? On the flip side of that, early online-centric titles like Bethesda's Brink no longer have working servers, so the drop-in, drop-out nature of Brink's gameplay design is filled to the brim with pretty stupid bots that can't complete objectives to save their lives, like, at all. It's made worse by the fact that, again, without an update, the bots are even more stupid than they let on, as they'll often find themselves stuck looking at walls or straight up not moving. It's a messy situation all around. Next up, I want to tackle companies that are allowed to rewrite their own history in the eyes of current and potentially future fans. Final Fantasy XV was one confusing release, stuck in development hell as Versus 13 in 2011, revealed to be a full-fledged FF sequel in 2013, and later followed by Square's first multi-platform FF release in 2016. You'd think a game that went through such a crazy development cycle would launch feature complete, right? Well, you're watching a video on the death of games, so you know where this is going. 15's biggest problem wasn't that it launched broken or anything. No, it literally launched unfinished. Without digging into spoilers, there's sections of the stories where party members will up and disappear for large chunks of chapters as you proceed through the main plot line. The game also kind of just drops you into a plot that's clearly been in motion for quite some time. Due to the jarring presentation, the final chapter in vanilla Final Fantasy XV came off as a massive slap in the face, as it's, and I'm not joking here, essentially one long hallway where you beat up some enemies, click interact on a building, and then you gauntlet 2 bosses as the game wraps up. This was and still kind of is a disgrace to the legacy Final Fantasy has built over its, at the time, 20+ year history. I vividly remember beating this game the day after the Christmas I received it. It was short, sloppily told, and left me feeling empty upon completion. All of that was bad enough, but what really scarred me was the Final Fantasy XV Season Pass. The pass included DLCs for party members in the game, in which you play through the sections where they disappear from the plot, meaning, yup, essential character development and world building and the general story flow were cut as either a cost-saving measure or a method to simply extract as much money from the player as possible. Naturally, fans were upset, including myself, and we basically made it a vow to boycott FF15's scummy DLC practices to send a message. And shockingly, it kinda worked. That season pass, according to Square, did not sell well at all, and the DLCs went basically unplayed, and we hope Square Enix would learn from their lesson. However, something curious happened. FF15 ended up re-releasing on PC as the Windows Edition, and it came with a lot of extra content, including a patched-in final dungeon and the DLC for what was originally the game's standard MSRP. This means all the players on Steam that got around to checking the game out had an overall positive experience. The game was mostly patched up, it was fixed, and a lot of the problems that plagued the vanilla launch were smoothed over. Very quickly, the conversation about all the anti-consumer stuff Square pulled was overwritten by 2 key phrases. Steam players often said, "I don't get why so many people hate this game. I played it, and it was great." That same sentiment reawakened when Square delisted FF15 Vanilla from digital storefronts and in its place put up a Royal Edition which contained everything aside from the Adrian DLC. Now the conversation surrounding Square's anti-consumer policies went out the window. I mean, no harm, no foul, right? No. On the consoles they originally released on, they were offered a Royal Pack, which contained some in-game items and access to zones and dungeons that were locked away within the Royal Edition of the game, but the Season Pass still had to be purchased. This made upgrading on consoles even more of a pain to consumers that simply want to experience the full game they bought back in 2016. Sadly though, the conversation surrounding this confusing catastrophe is all but washed away. So there I was, out of games to play on the fresh release of my PS5, and I decided to give Final Fantasy XV another go, hoping that maybe this time, I discovered something different with the game after all these years. As I played through it, it was the equivalent of settling in with a comfy book and a fireplace soothing me in the background. It was an effortless experience, up until I hit chapter 13. That's when I heard some new dialogue. The game started going to places I didn't remember. The story felt more fleshed out, and then it dawned upon me. At that moment in 2020, the game I was getting comfortable with is not the same game I played in 2016. That version, thanks to the PS Plus upgrade effectively burned into my account, is gone, dead and buried. Right there, I realized, wait a minute, people don't like Final Fantasy 15. Y'all like Royal Edition. Y'all like the Windows Edition. They like the semi-complete version of the game Square meticulously crafted. This scrappy hero that tried its best but could never fully reach its potential. And that aggravates me to no end. This has been a big issue in the recent JRPG circles. Persona 5 recently did it with, funnily enough, their own Royal Edition that adds new characters and rewrites a huge chunk of the plot. Which, hey, I guess to be fair, they've been doing that since Persona 3 and 4, but my point still stands. The difference between 15's vanilla and Persona 5's vanilla is simple. Atlus doesn't pretend Persona 5 does not exist. You can still purchase it and play it on the PlayStation Store to this day. They don't even bury it with keywords or anything. 15's vanilla, however, is literally gone. Without a physical copy and a method to circumvent auto updates, you effectively can't experience what the game was like for a majority of players who played it on launch day. And that boils my blood, because Square Enix won in the end. No one cares anymore about how anti-consumer the whole ordeal was because, hey, why wouldn't you just want the complete edition that's on sale constantly for around $30? Or you had it free with PS Plus. The whole game is right here, silly. Vanilla 15 can no longer hurt you. The worst part of patch culture is, unlike previous era of games, there's no rolling back. There's no exploring the past. You are forced to live in the future. As the games continue to get patched, these memories and experiences I and thousands of other players have formed are not going to run in congruence with what people are going through in a modern time. Once Corps realized they could get away with significantly changing games over time, instead of releasing a finished product, we entered what would ultimately doom the AAA game industry. Live service games doomed us all. Now games change every 3 to 6 months, and with each change, they straight up kill aspects of the game in broad daylight, and we all have grown numb enough to accept it. Before I dive into full doomer mode, I'll preface this by saying, not all live services are bad, and not all changes are world-ending. Fortnite, despite its faults, has so many changes per season that usually would warrant a full purchase of a new game. From the progression changes, to the endless new weapons and map resets, not to mention when they straight up add 3 new modes that have nothing in common gameplay-wise. So, in some minor cases, live services can work, and hey, at least Fortnite preserves its faulted weapons or mechanics in their Unreal Engine Creative Hub. There's also the Fortnite OG mode they added, which is basically taking players back to the past with a couple of quality of life improvements. Again, I think Fortnite could have gone a step further with that mode. It's nice that there's OG building, weapon rotation, and maps are back, but the movement and weapon feel still stems from modern Fortnite design philosophy, and that's because they had a whole engine change going from UE4 to UE5. See, like, even when I try to put out the good in live services, there's always an element of erasure. And in Fortnite's case, you never truly own anything from the game, so the devs can do whatever the heck they want. It's a license, a signed contract between us, the player, and Epic, the developers, that we don't own anything in our locker. We are simply granted access to them when the V-Bucks leave our wallet and the items are added to our account. So if Fortnite chooses tomorrow to become a metaverse social hub with no battle royale and limited custom maps, we're out of luck. This is the biggest drawback with supporting modern free-to-play titles. Us players have little to no agency, and the publishers behind these games are allowed carte blanche to do whatever they feel is right for the future of their product. Which means, I gotta ask, what happens when you do purchase a game and devs decide, forget it, we need a bag and we're going free-to-play? Oh, hi again, Bungie. Destiny 2 is a case so complex, it's worth a video in and of itself. I remember liking Destiny 1, but I never dabbled with the expansions or whatever, so I figured, hey, Destiny 2 will be a great jumping on point to see what I missed out on. I picked it up, played the game, enjoyed my time, and waited patiently for the first DLC pack. Then, Forsaken came out, and it got a mixed reception. I go, gee dang it, I got conned again, and waited around for the inevitable fix everything patch I've grown very numb to in the AAA space. Then Lightfall happens, seemingly Destiny 2 Shadowbringers moment. Now, it's my time to hop into the... Oh, hey, that's perfect, I can play on my PC. Oh, wait, well, how am I gonna play with my weapons vaulted? You're vaulting weapons? Oh my goodness. I paid $60 for a paperweight. I have zero idea to where to simply restart, or even start at all. The main campaign is effectively dismembered. The DLCs missed are literally locked in a digital vault. The raids I went to run through with the group now cost real money. Everything about the game is crazy. I'm shocked. No, I'm sorry, I'm dumbfounded. How in the world are there still players? Like, everything about this game is built specifically for the top 5% of people that stick around. It's impossible to get new players on board, let alone returning folk. These are just a few examples I have of games radically changing thanks to the live service format. What stings the most is it usually takes place in genres that don't need all of this. Destiny is a first-person looter shooter with a shoehorned-in Monster Hunter style gathering hub. Do you really need to gut the main campaign and vault raids to keep, server cost or whatever down? Fortnite is a fun live service that, when down, I'll never be able to experience again, and the money and time I've sunk into it could be erased at a moment's notice. Speaking of which, Halo Infinite will never be finished, by the way. The live service model was deemed a failure thanks to the over-monetization, and 343 staff has been severely weakened thanks to layoffs. The next plan for Halo? Move it to Unreal Engine and work on yet another entry in the franchise, if it even comes out. There's countless examples of games that significantly change over time, both for the better and some for the worse. The problem is when these games change as dramatically as we've seen. It leads to a version of a game's death, and that flat out sucks. To end my point, I want to talk about a genre that means the absolute world to me, but has sadly been afflicted with the modern game's curse. It's time we take a look at the fighting game. Y'all thought this wasn't gonna be a fighting game video, huh? Nope. It all goes back to fighting games are no strangers to version upgrades. Look at my pal Street Fighter 2 here, and his brother, Street Fighter 2 Turbo. Oh, and would you look at that? It's Super Street Fighter 2. I almost forgot to mention Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. All of these games are different in small but impactful ways, from adding characters to their roster to giving old fighters new moves. Arcades didn't have to do much to keep the version upgrades flowing. Swapping the internal PCB and the marquees would prove good enough for most establishments. At home, however, well, get ready to cough up some money. This made buying fighting games a bit difficult for the average gamer, cause you never know when Capcom was gonna come in with either an EA roster update or a full-blown balance change. Now, fighting game diehards, we know ball, and we'll tell you as much. Let's just keep it a stack. Street Fighter 2 and Hyper Street Fighter 2 are not the same game, not even close. Original Street Fighter 2 doesn't even have Cammy, y'all. The second most iconic fighting game girly next to Chun-Li. Since the advent of fighting games, developers do their best to keep player bases happy, and without getting into the nitty-gritty of it all, that means a lot of sequels or version updates in rapid succession. I'm talking 1 year apart from each other at times. SF2 was and still is the outlier of this design philosophy. I mean, Capcom's not dropping game-changing updates within 6 months of each other anymore. However, that core of updating fighting games to keep a player base satisfied is still heavy within fighting game culture. Thankfully, for the most part, during the 360 era of consoles, Capcom, ArcSys, and even Namco Bandai stuck to their guns and kept releasing new games as version upgrades over simply patching in the new stuff. To be fair, Super Street Fighter 4 offered version upgrades to its arcade edition and subsequent Ultra release through each console's respective digital storefront for a reduced price, meaning that to this day, you can go back and use Version Select to play older versions of Street Fighter 4 characters within the most up-to-date Ultra Street Fighter 4 release. I think this was by far the best model in terms of preservation and just pure fun factor. Even if you buy Ultra Street Fighter 4 physically, you won't be locked out of this Version Select feature, and I think that's awesome. Tournament players can learn the new stuff on the Ultra patch, and the casual crowd can always revert to a patch or a character feel that they personally prefer. The runner-up to this model was the ArcSys titles. With the exception of Guilty Gear Accent Core Plus R and Guilty Gear Xrd Revelator, both of which offered a version select, all of the titles they dropped were single standalone entries, meaning if you ever want to go back and experience the ridiculousness of Calamity Trigger Carl, yes, BBCF players used to be so much more powerful than his Central Fiction counterpart, all you gotta do is boot up Steam, add to cart, and have a good one. Or for the other games, you could track down a physical copy for the hardware of your choice. And look at you Persona 4 Arena enjoyers. In modern times, new age fighting game players aren't so lucky. Ever since the advent of, well, Killer Instinct, guess who's at the head of the crime yet again? Killer Instinct is a free-to-play fighting game. On launch day, the game was a bit light on content, launching with 6 characters, then totaling to 8 by the end of Season 1. The free-to-play model was bare bones, but effective. You had access to 1 character, that being Jago. However, you could train against the whole cast without the need of unlocks. Package arcade mode and online lobbies into that update later philosophy, and we have a recipe for the classic drip feed of content, but within the fighting game context. How did Killer Instinct manage to survive for 3 seasons in a state like this? Simple. It had a really low buy-in. Killer Instinct season passes were $20, with single characters costing around $5. This super low buy-in and cheap entry is what helped KI not only sustain itself, but become really successful in the eyes of the FGC. So the game was constantly updated with a ton of releases, and balance changes were consistent on a month-to-month basis. And since Iron Galaxy was beyond goated, the fan response to a majority of patches was favorable. The devs hosted streams where they broke down gameplay changes. They go out to tournaments during the Killer Instinct World Cup and showcase cool things that'll be changed as patches rolled in. You gotta understand, the KI team was just built different. It was a very consumer-forward game, all things considered. Given the fact they were a smaller development team with an extremely tight budget who tried their damnedest to revive an IP on a console no one really wanted to buy. Personally, I think it got the gears turning in the fighting game industry. Free to play for a fighting game just made sense at this point, and the model they used was generous. I truly think the only gripe I have with the model was the fact you didn't unlock every character offline in versus mode. But at the same time, how else would they make money? The season pass model worked for KI because the game's buy-in was solely dependent on the consumer. If you only wanted to play as Fulgor, you could simply pay $5 and go seasons 1 through 3 perfectly fine. You can play online, complete the story mode, go through arcade, play survival. Heck, you could even train against other characters you don't own, and maybe you'll find a new main through practice. Something fighting games still struggle with in 2025. The model works because the game was built around it. Nowadays, everyone can unlock all characters via Game Pass, and seasons 1 through 2 were free on games with gold a handful of times, or you can get it cheap on Steam for like $30 with PC and Xbox crossplay. Killer Instinct was and still is the blueprint model for modern fighting games. While I resent the fact you can never go back and play older versions of KI, it's very clear, like Fortnite, the game was never built with that future in mind. Every mechanic and character was fine-tuned and tweaked as we reached the game's end of service, and the community helped contribute to said changes heavily, which is what you want when you're building a multiplayer exclusively skewed fighting game. So surely, seeing KI's success, all fighting game developers will take the right notes moving forward, right? Nope, instead we get Street Fighter V. Instead of a slim but free-to-play low-cost entry in the SF franchise, we got a overpriced, broken, buggy experience that filtered every single casual known demand and left the game in a state where it was geared specifically for aspiring FGC pros. Y'all gotta remember what it was like in 2016 during the rollout of this game. Capcom was promising us players that we could earn fight money to buy characters, only for the game to drop and show that grinding in-game money to earn a character would take an immeasurable amount of time, as Capcom kneecapped fighter money milestones after players cleared story mode and character trials, effectively forcing the entire player base into the paid season pass economy. Cue the FGC gold rush. Suddenly, every AA fighting game with a pulse had a season pass. Goodbye to versions, embrace change. 2017 was the turning point with the advent of SF5 Season 2. While SF5 Arcade Edition was released physically down the line, even if you had an original Street Fighter V disc, no more was Season 1. Instead, it was overwritten to make way for Season 2 and everything that it brought. Patch culture was officially in. I have a problem with this for a simple and maybe petty fact, but it goes back to why I brought up KI in the first place. When I played KI, I felt a connection between the community and the company that was making it. I purchased the season passes knowing full well that this is a game that will be ever changing, and I was okay with that. When I bought Street Fighter V, or even Tekken 7 to an extent, I purchased it to play those vanilla versions of the game. Sure, some patches were great, but others not so much. I don't want to fight or even look at Ed on my screen, bruh. I wanted some of my old Armika tech back pre-nerfs, but now and for the rest of time, there's no way I can get that back. It's effectively overwritten and erased. The Street Fighter V game I held in my hands back in 2016 isn't what the box art says. When I pop in the disc, no, now and forever, it's the Championship Edition, where Luke was left beyond top tier and broken as they ushered in the next generation of Street Fighter. The same sentiment goes for games like Guilty Gear Strive, Dragon Ball FighterZ, BB Tag. Oh my gosh, I could write a dissertation on BB Tag 2.0. That's a huge one for me. And the list goes on and on and on, and there's so many versions of these games that are now left dead and buried within a genre that was never supposed to be the norm. The current model of fighting games infuriates me to no end, because you're effectively dropping potentially hundreds of dollars into a version of a game that
may not stick around. I loved Dragon Ball FighterZ. It was my forever game. I still appreciate it to this day. But the state it's in now it's definitely a shell of its former self circa season 2 and 3. And sure, they had metas I wasn't fond of. I mean, snapback meta could go to hell for all I care. So there were certain characters that were way too overtuned, but it sucks that I can't go back and revisit that. That's something new I have to reconcile with, and I guess I'm just grieving it is all. The tendrils of the AAA gaming curse have overtaken my favorite genre, and everywhere I look, things just get worse. It'd be different if these games were free to play and had frequent patches and changes and they listened to community feedback like Killer Instinct did in 2013. If I, the player, am signing that EULA fully accepting I'm at the whims of the developers, dropping titles during a bad patch wouldn't hurt as bad, but they're not free to play. These are full-priced $100 games that can change radically year to year with no way of going back if a version doesn't fully suit your taste. Truth be told, this is probably why modern fighting game players are complaining and raging more than we ever have before. There's simply no option to say, nah, I'm good off this game I used to love. Instead, you're forced to accept the new state of a title you already paid for. You gotta hold that. The difference between traditional releases and fighting games is simple. Your main character in Black Ops 7 or whatever, they're not getting new moves or crazy meta-defining shakeups out of the blue 2 years later. Or rather, on the flip side with a game like Street Fighter 6, where you gotta wait a year and a half to see if any changes to your character will come. And if they do come, will they be lackluster? Fighting games are outliers of the live service model, and it's exactly why I've grown numb to the recent releases, because I've been getting burnt so bad these past few years. Every developer you see here copied the business model of a team that was much smaller in scope and had a hell of a lot more focus in their vision. Why did they leave out the part where these games were free to play? Why did they get rid of that unsigned contract me and the KI devs had? That beats me. But if you're going to copy the model in an effort to extract as much cash from your dwindling user base, then you gotta put forth the extra effort. I'm looking at you, Street Fighter 6. I mean, a year and a half with no alternate costume support, and when they finally get here, it's a bunch of swimsuit alts I couldn't be caught dead using in a tournament or in my personal time to begin with. It's the lack of alternate outfits at all in Guilty Gear Strive's case, but ArcSys has gone on record that they want Strive to be a lengthy live service. It's Tekken's abysmal PNG on t-shirts or hair swoosh collabs. If you're not financially equipped to keep up with the demands of a live service, then why continuously get the hopes up of thousands of your FGC players with a business model that's lifted directly from a free-to-play live service? That's why I don't get it. That's why I'm frustrated. That's why I'm ranting. All I know is as a consumer, I've grown increasingly wary of supporting the modern slate of fighters for this exact reason. Because, to be frank with you, I'm tired of watching my genre die. That's all this boils down to, man. I play live services and they die. Games I love, die. Games I've bonded over, die. Games that mean something to me, die. All of them gone in an instant. I don't even get to say goodbye. You dig out an old console like the Wii U or 360, and my entire digital library is wiped from downloading. Which means I have no choice but to turn towards hacking and soft modding to get titles I couldn't purchase and support it if I wanted to. It's like I'm living through this delayed Thanos snap, and it's a 50-50 mix if the things I enjoy will last. And I'm tired of corrupt publishers forcing their will upon me when I simply want to enjoy the art the devs are cooking. I'm sick to my stomach seeing the endless cancellation of projects that were teased when my frontal lobe didn't even start developing. I don't know. I worry that the constant erasure of art starts to twist and morph the conversation surrounding games. The disposable mindset we've dug ourselves into is exactly what's going to be this industry's undoing if we don't address the root of the problem. Fellas, look at me when I say this. We're all grieving the loss of our favorite patches, systems, map rotations, literally everything we lose when a new patch rolls in. There's a difference between art that's forgotten and art that's erased. When we discover a janky old 3D platformer curse the PS2 forever, it's not dead art. It's simply art that's underrated, underappreciated. When a patch comes and fundamentally shakes up a game, or servers close on a purchase you had back in 2019, it's dead. Gone forever, with no hope of a resurgence or a comeback. And if it does happen, it'll be nothing but a nostalgia-ridden corpse that's masquerading as the game you once loved, so publishers can extract money from a beloved fanbase once again. I'm a strong believer in the concept of death not being the end. I mean, eventually we'll all go and return to the earth, and in a beautiful way, give life back to the soil and trees and all that good stuff. But when games die, when servers close, when patches drop, and shake up how things were played in the first place, I think a fate worse than death hits that piece of art. It's eviscerated, permanently removed, gone, forgotten, overwritten forever until the end of time. And that's a fate I wish on no games.